Welcome to This Explainer, where we dive straight into the fascinating biology of sleep. We're going to figure out what your mind is actually doing when the lights go out. Honestly, exploring the science of sleep completely changes how you understand your own body, and I am super excited to unpack this with you. Seriously, think about it for a second. What is your brain actively executing while you just lie there, perfectly motionless in the dark? You close your eyes, you lose consciousness, and from the outside it looks like absolutely nothing is happening, right? But beneath the surface, it is an absolute symphony of biological activity. We spend a staggering 1/3 of our entire lives asleep. Let that sink in. If you live to be 90, you will have spent 30 solid years completely unconscious. From an evolutionary perspective, that establishes some massive biological stakes. Think about it. If sleep wasn't absolutely essential for our survival, it would literally be the biggest evolutionary mistake nature ever made. So let's just bust a massive myth right out of the gate. For the longest time, scientists actually thought sleep was entirely passive. They thought it was just a simple powering down of the brain, kind of like just shutting the lid on your laptop at the end of the day. But the reality? Your sleeping brain is relentlessly active. It is busy performing critical, life-saving jobs that simply cannot be done while you're awake. So let's get right into the 4 stages of sleep, which run in these highly structured 90-minute cycles. You see, throughout the night, you don't just stay in one single state. You kind of walk down this visual staircase of sleep stages. You start at the very top with light N1 sleep. Then you step down to N2, where your brain starts firing off these rapid bursts of activity called sleep spindles and K complexes. From there, you descend deep down into N3 slow wave sleep. This is the deepest stage. This is where your body releases growth hormone, boosts the immune system, and focuses heavily on physical repair. And finally, you ride the elevator all the way back up into REM, rapid eye movement sleep, where your brain suddenly becomes almost as active as it is when you're wide awake. Moving on to the brain's nightly detox and memory maintenance routine. This brings us to an incredibly groundbreaking discovery made back in 2012 by researcher Mike and Niedergard, the glymphatic system. You can think of this as your brain's very own fleet of city street sweepers. During deep N3 sleep, your brain cells literally shrink. They shrink by up to 60%. It's a bizarre and amazing mechanism because it creates all this extra space for cerebral spinal fluid to rush in and literally wash away the metabolic waste that built up during your day. Crucially, this includes flushing out amyloid beta plaques, which are toxic proteins heavily linked to Alzheimer's disease. Without deep sleep, all that trash just piles up in your brain. And while your brain is physically scrubbing itself clean, it's also organizing your memories. It's helpful to think of your hippocampus as a temporary USB drive. Throughout the day, it's recording your experiences, but, it has limited storage. So during sleep, your brain hits replay on the day's events and safely transfers all those files over to the neocortex, which is your brain's permanent hard drive for long-term storage. The impact of this data transfer is absolutely huge. According to sleep researcher Matthew Walker, studying and then getting a good night's sleep improves your memory recall by a massive 40% compared to just staying awake. 40%! This perfectly illustrates why pulling an all-nighter for a test or a big presentation is such a bad idea. It actually destroys the memory consolidation you just worked so hard for. You're basically yanking the USB drive out before the files have finished transferring. Meanwhile, when you shift into REM sleep, a completely different type of processing happens. Your amygdala, which is the emotional center of your brain, really lights up. Matthew Walker actually calls dreaming a form of overnight therapy. Sleep selectively strengthens your memories while quietly stripping away the painful emotional charge attached to them. So you remember the event, but you feel way less distressed by it. REM is also when we integrate creativity, run mental threat simulations to prep for the real world, and lock in procedural memory. If you're learning to play the piano or trying to learn how to code, it's during REM sleep that your brain actually wires those physical skills into your nervous system. All right, let's shift gears and look at the biological drivers, clocks, pressure, and caffeine that actually regulate when we fall asleep. Okay, so you have this master 24-hour internal clock, and it's regulated by a tiny little structure in your hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Now, a lot of people totally misunderstand melatonin. Melatonin is just a timing signal. It's not a sedative. It doesn't magically knock you out. It simply acts like a starter pistol, telling your body that it's dark and it's time to prep for sleep. This is exactly why the blue light from our phone screens is so disruptive. It suppresses that melatonin, tricking your brain into thinking the sun is still up. Furthermore, your core body temperature actually has to drop 1 to 2 degrees Celsius for you to initiate sleep. That explains why taking a warm bath right before bed paradoxically helps. It draws all your blood out to the surface of your skin, which actually accelerates the cooling of your inner core. But alongside that 24-hour clock, you've got a second major force at play: sleep pressure. From the exact moment you wake up, this chemical called adenosine continuously builds up in your brain. As the day goes on, this chemical acts like a physical pressure valve, drastically increasing your biological urge to sleep. The longer you're awake, the heavier that pressure becomes. And this brilliantly explains exactly how your morning, or let's be real, afternoon cup of coffee actually works. Caffeine does not give you true energy. Instead, it temporarily clamps shut the adenosine receptors in your brain. It basically acts like a block, tricking your brain into feeling alert and totally masking your exhaustion. But here's the catch. While the caffeine is blocking the signal, that adenosine is still building up behind the scenes. So when the caffeine finally wears off, boom, you experience a massive crash because that underlying sleep debt was never actually eliminated. Which brings us to the sleep deprivation trap and the very real-world dangers of carrying around that sleep debt. The stark reality here is just undeniable. After just 17 hours a week, your cognitive performance drops to the equivalent of a 0.05% blood alcohol level. And if you push it to 24 hours a week, you are operating at a 0.10% blood alcohol equivalent. In most countries, that means you are functionally and legally drunk. Your reaction times, your judgment, your physical coordination, they are entirely compromised. We've also got to shatter this illusion of catching up on the weekends. We all like to think we can just burn the candle at both ends from Monday to Friday, and then sleep in on Saturday to fix it. It's incredibly common, but the research shows that sleep debt cannot be fully repaid like a bank loan. Even after a full week of recovery sleep, certain cognitive deficits caused by chronic sleep restriction still persist. You simply can't just undo the damage. And this creates this vicious, compounding trap known in the science community as the Matthew effect. It starts with poor sleep, which directly impairs your decision-making. You wake up exhausted, so you make worse lifestyle choices. Maybe you skip the gym, you eat a bunch of junk food, or you drink way too much caffeine. Well, that leads to higher stress, which then makes it even harder to fall asleep the next night. It just becomes this relentless, compounding negative spiral. This exact cycle, combined with the constant disruption of the circadian clock, explains why shift workers suffer from significantly higher rates of metabolic disease and even cancer. The bottom line, sleep is not a luxury. It's your ultimate biological life support system. So I challenge you to try going to bed just 30 minutes earlier tonight. Give your brain that extra time it desperately needs to wash away the toxins and save your memories. And as you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself, what other incredible secrets is your mind unlocking while you are completely unaware?